Have you ever stared at the ceiling in the dead of night and whispered, "What am I really doing with my life?" That haunting question doesn't leave easily. It echoes in the silent spaces of our soul, in the failures we try to forget, and in the dreams we secretly fear are too big for us. But there is one man, just one kind of man, who stands up when everyone else gives up. One who walks forward when others kneel in fear. That man is not the strongest, not the richest, not the most intelligent. He is simply the man who trusts only God. And that faith, unshakable, immovable, changes everything. Faith begins where logic ends, in a world that worships logic, data, and guarantees. Faith seems like foolishness. But let me tell you this, real breakthroughs are never born out of logic. They are birthed in blind faith. The man who trusts only God walks by faith, not by sight. When doors slam shut, when people walk away, when everything seems broken, that man doesn't panic. He doesn't beg. He doesn't manipulate. He believes. And that belief has power. It creates pathways where there were walls. It whispers hope when silence screams despair. Because faith is not based on what is seen, but what is believed. The fire doesn't scare him. It refines him. Life throws fires at all of us. Betrayals, delays, heartbreaks, and disappointments. But while others run from the flames, the man who trusts only God walks into them. Not because he loves pain, but because he knows who controls the fire. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he knows there is another in the fire with him. His faith is not a shield that avoids pain. It is a furnace that purifies purpose. He knows that pressure is not punishment. It's preparation. He's not crying, "Why me?" He's declaring, "Use me," because he knows that God never wastes a storm. Every flame is a tool to mold his future. He moves even when the map is missing. The man who trusts only God doesn't wait for the perfect conditions. He doesn't need to see the entire staircase. He takes the first step. When God says, "Go," he moves. Even when the path looks impossible, even when fear whispers, "What if you fail?" He trusts that God's voice is louder than his fear. He understands that God doesn't give details. He gives directions. The man knows that delayed obedience is still disobedience. So he walks, with trembling knees but a steady heart, the knowing that faith without movement is dead. The world calls him crazy, but heaven calls him chosen. They'll call him unrealistic, irrational, Narvi. But what they don't see is the foundation under his feet. The world can't understand the peace that flows when everything is falling apart. He doesn't need external validation because he's anchored in divine confirmation. While the world is chasing applause, he's chasing alignment. He knows that the opinions of man are temporary, but the promises of God are eternal. So when they laugh, he smiles. When they doubt, he believes. Because he's not living for the approval of men. He's living for the pleasure of one. Rejection doesn't break him. It resurrects him. The man who trusts only God is no stranger to rejection. Friends disappear. Opportunities vanish. Doors close. But instead of mourning what's lost, he celebrates what's coming. Because he knows something the world doesn't see. Man's rejection is God's redirection. Every no from man is setting him up for a divine yes. He doesn't chase people. He follows purpose. He doesn't force relationships. He surrenders to alignment. He understands that the people who left weren't meant to carry his destiny. Because when God removes, he's making room to release. He doesn't pray for comfort. He prays for courage. You'll never hear him beg for an easier life. Instead, you'll hear him pray for strength, clarity, and boldness. He knows that comfort zones are graves for growth. He's not afraid of the battle because he's already been trained in the wilderness. His prayers are not just words. They are weapons. He doesn't pray small prayers for average outcomes. He prays big, dangerous prayers. The kind that demand change. The kind that shake atmospheres. The kind that open impossible doors. Because his confidence isn't in himself, it's in the God who never fails. When others complain, he commands. When the storm hits, most people panic. But the man who trusts only God doesn't complain, he commands. He understands spiritual authority. He speaks to the mountain. He declares to the valley. He doesn't just hope for change, he decrees it. His words carry weight, not because of who he is, but because of who backs him. He knows that life and death are in the power of the tongue. He uses his words not to describe the situation, but to transform it. He doesn't echo the noise of the world. He releases the sound of heaven. Delay doesn't mean denial. He's waited, sometimes in tears, sometimes in silence, but never in doubt. Because the man who trusts only God knows that delay is not denial, it's development. He understands that the waiting room is not a punishment, it's a preparation room. While others grow bitter in delay, he grows deeper in devotion. While others question the timing, he trusts the author of time. He doesn't give up in the delay. He gets ready. He's preparing not just for the blessing, but to become the man who can carry it. He knows that premature promotion can destroy destiny. His confidence is unbreakable. Because it's not his own, there's a different kind of confidence in him. Not arrogant, not loud, but quiet, steady, and unshakable. Because it's not rooted in him, it's rooted in God. He doesn't boast in his own strength. He boasts in his surrender. He understands that weakness is not a liability. It's an invitation for God to show up. When he's empty, he expects God to pour. When he's broken, he expects God to build. His faith is not in what he can do, but in what God can do through him, and that makes him unstoppable. He builds when others break. There are moments when everything around him seems to collapse. Jobs lost, relationships shattered, dreams delayed, but instead of collapsing with it, he builds. Like Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, he picks up the broken pieces and trusts God to make something greater. He doesn't need perfect conditions to start building. All he needs is a word from God. And while others are overwhelmed by ruins, he sees revelation. He sees what can be, not just what is, because he believes that God brings beauty from ashes and purpose from pain. He doesn't just survive. He shifts atmospheres. Walk into a room where this man stands and you'll feel it. The shift. The stillness, the authority. It's not noise, it's presence. Not chaos, but clarity. Because the man who trusts only God carries the atmosphere of heaven with him. He doesn't adjust to the world's energy. He redefines it. In a room full of fear, he brings faith. In a place filled with anxiety, he brings peace. He understands that as a vessel of God, he is never empty. He's always filled with divine power, ready to pour it out to a hurting world. His story becomes a weapon. He's been through hell. But he didn't stop there. He kept walking. And now what once looked like scars have become signs. Signs of survival. Signs of grace. Signs of victory. His story is no longer his shame. It's his strategy. He tells it boldly, not to glorify pain, but to magnify God. He knows that there's someone out there waiting to hear how he made it. Waiting to believe that they can too. His testimony becomes a weapon in the hands of the next generation. And with every word, he's not just sharing a past, he's unlocking futures. He knows God is never late. Just preparing something greater. Time has passed. Promises seem delayed. But still, he waits, not passively, but with expectant faith. Because he knows that every second of silence is strategic. Every moment of quiet is orchestrated. God is not ignoring him. He's arranging something better. What looks like silence is strategy. What looks like denial is design. The man who trusts only God doesn't grow weary in waiting. He grows stronger. Because he knows that divine timing is not just perfect. It's prophetic. And when the moment comes, it will be so powerful, so undeniable that everyone who doubted will see. His faith changed everything. You don't need proof. You need faith. When life breaks you, faith builds you back stronger. Move even when it makes no sense. Them chose you. Delay ain't denial. It's set-up season. Faith didn't just change him. It changed everything. You don't need to prove. Need faith. Faith. Let me ask you something real honest. How many times have you stopped yourself from moving forward because you didn't see how it would all work out? How many dreams have you put on hold? How many prayers have you paused? How many ideas have you buried? Just because you didn't have proof that it would succeed. We live in a world that screams, "Show me the evidence," before it ever believes. But God works in reverse. He says, Believe first, and then I'll show you what I can do. That's why I'm telling you right now, you don't need proof. You need faith. Faith is what makes you take the first step when your knees are shaking. Faith is what keeps you going when the people closest to you stop believing in you. Faith is what whispers, keep building, when everything around you looks like ruins. Faith isn't just a word, it's a weapon, a power, a force that turns the invisible into the undeniable. You see, the man who trusts only God has learned to move without a map. He's learned to walk on water, not because the sea turned into solid ground, but because he kept his eyes on the one who called him. That's what faith is. It's not walking when it's easy. It's walking when it's dark, confusing, and painful, and still saying, I know God's got me. Look, if you keep waiting for everything to make sense, you're going to be waiting forever. Proof is limited to what's already happened. But faith is a preview of what's coming. And trust me, what's coming is bigger than what you've seen. But you'll never touch it if you don't believe it first. You don't need more confirmations. You don't need signs in the sky. You don't need a perfect plan written out in front of you. What you need is that inner eyes, that fire in your gut that says, even if I can't see it, I believe God is working. Because when you have faith, everything changes. Your mindset changes. Your vocabulary changes. Your posture changes. You stop talking like a victim and start walking like a warrior. You stop begging for open doors and start expecting them. You stop trying to convince people of your calling and start confidently stepping into it. That's what faith does. It shifts your identity. It silences your doubt. It anchors your soul. The enemy wants you to wait for proof because he knows you'll never start. But God, he's waiting for your faith, not your perfection, not your performance, just your faith. That's it. So, I'm telling you right now, stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting for everything to be lined up. Step out. Move. Trust. Because faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. You don't need proof. You don't need confirmation. You just need to believe that if God called you, he'll carry you. Let that be your fire today. When life breaks you, faith builds you back stronger. Let's get real. Life will break you. Not maybe, not probably. It will. At some point, no matter how strong, how smart, or how spiritual you think you are, life's gonna hit you with something you didn't see coming. Maybe it's a betrayal from someone you trusted. Maybe it's a door that slammed shut when you thought it was the one. Maybe it's the silence of unanswered prayers. Maybe it's just the weight of feeling like you're doing everything right, but still losing. But here's the difference between people who collapse under that pressure and the man who trusts only God. That man, he still breaks, but he doesn't stay broken. Because when life tries to tear him apart, faith starts to rebuild him from the inside out. Faith doesn't always protect you from the pain, but it always gives your pain a purpose. See, faith knows that brokenness is not the end. In fact, in God's hands, brokenness is the beginning. It's the place where ego dies and identity gets reborn. It's where pride gets shattered and purpose starts to rise. That man, the one who truly trusts only God, he's not afraid to fall apart because he knows that God is the only one who can put the pieces back together better than before. Let me tell you something powerful. God does his best work with broken people, not perfect people, not polished people, broken people. People who have cried themselves to sleep. People who have questioned their own worth. People who have stared at closed doors, wondering, why me? That's the kind of person God builds a masterpiece from. And that's exactly why the enemy tries to break you. Because he knows what God can do with your pain if you stay faithful. The man who trusts God doesn't deny the pain. He feels it. But he doesn't let it define him. He lets it refine him. That's the difference. He uses the pain as fuel. Every tear, every scar, every heartbreak becomes part of the foundation for something greater. He doesn't just survive the storm. He grows in it because he understands that pressure isn't punishment. It's preparation. The world says, if you're broken, you're done. But God says, If you're broken, you're ready. Ready to be shaped, ready to be strengthened, ready to be sent. That's why faith is so powerful. It builds strength in your spirit long before you ever see the results in your life. Listen, your pain isn't proof that God left you. It's proof that He's preparing something in you. Don't curse the season that's stretching you. Bless it, embrace it, grow through it, because every crack in your heart is a place where God's light can shine through. So when life breaks you, don't hide, don't run, don't quit. Lift your eyes, stand in the rubble, and declare, this will not break me. It will build me stronger, wiser, bolder, unshakable, because that's what faith does. It makes broken men unbreakable. Move even when it makes no sense. You ever been in a season where God told you to move, but everything around you screamed, don't you dare? Where your logic said, wait, but your spirit whispered, go. That's what this section is about, because the truth is, faith doesn't wait for understanding. It walks with obedience. Let me tell you something loud and clear. The man who truly trusts God does not wait until the path is perfect. He moves even when it makes no sense, because faith doesn't operate in the realm of comfort. Faith doesn't live inside your 5-year plan. Faith doesn't show up on spreadsheets or make sense on paper. Nah, faith shows up in moments where everything inside you is uncertain, but your soul is on fire with, I've got to move because God said so. Look at every story of greatness in the Bible. Abraham left his home for a land he'd never seen. Noah built a boat when there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Moses walked into a sea expecting it to split. None of it made sense, but it wasn't supposed to. Because when you walk by faith, you're not walking by sight. You're not walking by vision. You're not walking with answers. You're walking with trust. And here's the true thing, if you need full clarity before you move, you'll miss every miracle. If you need comfort before you act, you'll stay stuck in the same place for the rest of your life. But the man who trusts God, he moves, he steps, he obeys, not because he has all the facts, but because he has a word. Let me say this to you personally, that stirring in your heart, that nudge that won't leave you alone, that idea that scares you but won't go away. That's not your imagination. That's God calling you into something greater. And if you wait for it to make sense to everybody else, you'll miss it. Faith doesn't always make sense to people who don't hear what you hear. Sometimes you've got to walk into rooms you don't feel qualified for. Sometimes you've got to start building when you don't have the resources. Sometimes you've got to release people who don't understand your calling. And sometimes you've got to go without knowing why. Because trust means saying yes before you see how. It means planting seeds without knowing when the harvest will come. It means walking around Jericho every day, even when nothing's falling yet. And it means praising God in advance for victories you haven't seen, but believe are already done. So today, I dare you move, even if it's messy, even if it's scary, even if you don't know the destination. God never called you to figure it all out. He called you to follow. And when you move, even when it makes no sense, that's when heaven moves with you. That's when walls fall. That's when breakthroughs happen. That's when destiny starts unfolding. You don't have to understand the whole picture. You just need enough faith to take the next step. Move, even if it doesn't make sense. Let them doubt you. God chose you. Listen to me carefully right now. People are going to doubt you. That's a fact. Some will doubt you because they don't understand you. Some will doubt you because they do understand you, and they're afraid of what you're becoming. And some will doubt you just because they don't believe God could choose someone like you. But here's the truth. God doesn't need their vote to validate your vision. God didn't ask their permission before He anointed you. So let them doubt you. Let them question your qualifications. Let them roll their eyes. Let them whisper behind your back. You just keep walking because God chose you. See, the man who trusts only God doesn't live for applause. He's not fueled by validation. He's not addicted to being understood. Because once you know who called you, You stop worrying about who accepts you. And the truth is, sometimes God will intentionally let people doubt you just to prove that his favor isn't dependent on public opinion. People said David was just a shepherd boy. People said Moses had a stutter. People said Noah was crazy. People said Jesus was just the carpenter's son. And yet every one of them changed the world, not because people believed in them, but because God was with them. That's what makes you dangerous, not your resume, not your talent, not your following. What makes you dangerous is this: you've been chosen by God. And when God chooses you, it doesn't matter who counts you out. You're still in. Now, I need you to understand something here. Being chosen doesn't mean the journey will be easy. It means the purpose is eternal. It means that God saw every flaw, every failure, every fear, and still said, "Yep, that one's mine." So stop wasting your energy trying to convince people who were never meant to see your worth. Stop lowering your volume to fit into their comfort zones. Stop shrinking your calling just because it makes others uncomfortable. You are not here to play small. You are here to walk boldly in what God put inside you. Let them doubt you. Let them laugh. Let them assume you're not ready. You're not called to prove them wrong. You're called to prove God right. Because here's the secret. Your success doesn't come from being supported. It comes from being sent. And when God sends you, you are already equipped, already empowered, already anointed. Whether they see it or not. So walk with your head high. Speak with fire. Move with purpose. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to fit in. You've been called to stand out. The man who trusts God understands this. Favor is not fair, and it doesn't have to be. Because when God says, "You're the one," no amount of doubt can undo it. So let them doubt you. God chose you, and that settles it. God's timing is not your timing, but it's always right. Let's be honest, waiting is hard, especially when you're doing everything right. You're praying, you're trusting, you're sowing seeds, you're showing up every single day, but still silence, still no breakthrough, still doors not opening, and everything inside you wants to scream, "God, what are you waiting for?" But hear this loud and clear: God's timing is not your timing, but it's always right. See, we want fast, we want now, we want immediate results, but God isn't in the business of rushing purpose. He's in the business of perfecting it, because he's not just preparing the blessing for you, he's preparing you for the blessing. And sometimes the wait is the work. That's where your character is built. That's where your faith is stretched. That's where your roots grow deep. And let me tell you something. A delay is not a denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. It means it's not time. And when God says, "Not yet," he's not punishing you. He's protecting what's coming next. Because here's the truth: if God gave it to you too soon, it might crush you. You might sabotage it. You might idolize it. You might not even recognize it. But when it comes in his timing, it fits, it flows, it lasts, it's right. The man who truly trusts only God knows this. He doesn't panic when things seem delayed. He doesn't give up when the clock ticks louder. He doesn't compare his season to someone else's harvest. He stands steady. He keeps showing up. He keeps watering the seed. Because he knows that waiting on God is never wasted time. Sometimes God will hold it back just to make sure your heart is ready. Just to make sure your ego won't ruin it. Just to make sure your faith is mature enough to handle the weight of what you've been asking for. And here's the wild part. While you're waiting on God, he's working behind the scenes, arranging the right connections, blocking the wrong doors, growing you in ways you can't even see. Because when the moment finally comes, when his timing and your purpose collide, it will happen suddenly, instantly, effortlessly, and it will make sense why the wait was necessary. So don't rush it. Don't resent it. Don't try to force it. You see, the enemy wants you to doubt in the delay. He wants you to quit 5 minutes before the miracle. But the man who trusts God says, "Even if it takes longer than I hoped, I still believe." That kind of faith terrifies hell. That kind of trust moves heaven. You don't have to understand the schedule. You just have to trust the one holding the clock. So breathe, be still, and know, when it's time, nothing can stop it. Not the enemy, not your past, not even your own fears. Because God's timing is never late. It's just always right. When you trust God fully, you walk in unshakable peace. Let's be real for a second. Life gets loud. People get crazy. Problems pile up. Storms roll in without warning. And most people, they panic. They stress. They fall apart. But the man who truly trusts God, he walks different. He moves different. He carries a calm in the middle of chaos. Why? Because when you trust God fully, you walk in unshakable peace. I'm not talking about the kind of peace that depends on everything going right. No. I'm talking about peace that doesn't make sense. Peace that shows up in the hospital room. Peace that stands tall in a courtroom. Peace that whispers, I still believe. When everything else is falling apart, that's not natural peace. That's not worldly peace. That's supernatural. That's the kind of peace that only comes when you've surrendered control and said, God, I trust you with all of it. The pain, the process, the outcome. I trust you. You know what trusting God does? It quiets your spirit. It removes the need to control everything. It silences fear. It keeps you grounded when the world around you is shaking. Because when your heart is anchored in God, nothing can steal your peace, not even the storm. People may look at you and wonder, how are you not losing your mind right now? And you'll smile and say, because my peace doesn't come from this world. It comes from the one who holds my world. See, the man who walks with God doesn't need every answer. He doesn't need every door open right now. He doesn't need everyone to support him. He just needs one thing, the presence of God. Because when you've got his presence, you've got his peace. And when you've got his peace, you've got power. Power to rest when others are restless. Power to speak life when others speak fear. Power to keep walking forward when everything in you wants to sit down and quit. But listen, this kind of peace doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from real surrender, from giving it all to God day by day. Saying, God, I'm done trying to control it. I'm done trying to fix it on my own. I release it. I trust you. Lead me. And when you release it, you make room for peace to flood in. You want peace in your life. Trust him. Not just when it's easy. Not just when it's convenient. But even in the mystery. Even in the delay. Even in the pain. Because peace is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of God in the middle of them. So walk like a man who knows who's in control. Talk like a man who knows the victory is already won. Breathe like a man who knows heaven is backing him up. You don't have to panic. You don't have to strive. You don't have to fear. Just trust. Because when you trust God fully, you walk in a peace that nothing can shake. Conclusion and call to action. So here's the truth you can't ignore. The man who trusts only God is unstoppable. Not because he has all the answers, not because he's the strongest, smartest, or most qualified, but because he's fully surrendered. He doesn't rely on opinions. He doesn't need applause. He moves by faith, breathes by grace, and walks with a boldness this world can't understand. You've heard every part of this message for a reason. This wasn't just a motivational speech. This was a reminder from heaven. You've been chosen. You've been prepared. And if you trust God with everything, he will change everything. This is your moment. Don't go back to fear. Don't shrink back into silence. Don't let doubt sit at your table. Stand up in your faith. Trust him with the pain, the pressure, the process, and the promise. Let people doubt you. Let the timing confuse you. Let the storm rage around you. But you stay planted. You stay rooted. Because the man who trusts only God is not easily shaken. He knows his source. He knows his covering. And he knows the victory is already written. So here's what I want you to do next. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stay silent. Share it. Speak life to someone else. Drop a comment and tell the world, I trust God fully. And make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications. Because the journey doesn't stop here. We're building a community of people who walk by faith, not by sight. People who don't just want hype, they want heaven. People who aren't playing small, they're walking in purpose. So take that first bold step. Say it out loud. I trust God. No matter what. And now, go live like it.